when you have a difficult day or a difficult moment, it's not always easy to know how to get back up, let alone use that, the very source of empowerment, to channel passion and empower others. Well, we're lucky that we have Xian Horn here today because she has definitely empowered not only individuals, companies, but communities in how we rethink about self-esteem, communication, and how we show up in our full identities, including disabilities. As a half-Asian woman with cerebral palsy, she served as the founder of a nonprofit, Give Beauty Wings, and she'll talk about how she became an advocate, speaker, blogger, and exemplar of highlighting what it's like to be a person with disability, but also how you can advocate for your own self-esteem and why it's so important to hold on to that and nurture it. As we step into her personal journey of how she grew up, how her upbringing was, and in how it influenced how she thought and saw the world, it is a powerful reminder to recognize the people around us and the experience constantly empower us and can play a role in shaping what we think we can do, which also means we can choose to change that if we're not seeing the empowered voices right now. And that's what Xian wants to help you with. So get ready for a powered conversation. As we step into July, I'm very excited to celebrate Disability Pride Month and advocate for how we can be a better ally for disability. And so, what are you waiting for? Let's dive in and meet Xian Horn today. So welcome, Xian, to the show. I am so honored and excited to have you here. You have worn many, many hats and continue to do so. I think the number one thing I'm curious is what has helped you channel your personal journey of disability to empowerment and also empowering many others about how important that storytelling is and owning our identity?
Yeah, so I had no intentions of becoming an advocate. Traversing the world with two shiny ski poles, you call enough attention to yourself. And I felt like I always had to kind of minimize the ways in which I was different in a way, even though I will say the background for me, which we will get to, and I always bring up is, my parents were artists. They prized uniqueness. They always celebrated the fullness of who I was. So even though that was the case and it made me feel invincible, I think when I was meeting new people, for example, I remember in elementary school, kids saying to me, "But Sean, you're normal, right?" And they weren't trying to make some grand statement about what is normal, but what they were asking was, it's okay to talk to you. It's okay to connect with you. And so I would always say yes, because I wanted to make sure they knew I wasn't so different that we couldn't connect in a universal way or play My Little Pony or whatever we wanted to do. So I looked forward to having those first conversations just so that we could get to the portion of getting to know each other as human beings. And I think things have changed. I think it used to be that whoever was different had to be scrappy and adapt. But at least in the DEI world, I feel like it's more of an attitude of, I'm here. It's your job to invite me in and make sure I feel welcome. And I think social media is a big part of that. I think, there's a lot more awareness of different communities. There's also, I think, in terms of disability community, you can find anyone. And this is not even true of just disability, right? I think the internet has empowered all kinds of communities that used to feel very alone. So it's mostly positive. I do think sometimes it can get a little far, but we can get into that later. But but for me, that was, so I didn't think that, already being so obviously disabled, I kind of felt like I didn't want to do the obvious or just advocate because people, and be a poster child because other people wanted me to. That wasn't enough of a reason. But it wasn't until, again, having these parents who taught me anything was possible and believing them, I really honestly, I consider my disability, I've said this many times, so anyone who's heard me speak before knows this. I consider my disability the blessing of my life. And I have to thank Judy Heumann and the disability rights movement, especially in the 70s, for making that a possible statement. Because part of why I said that is I cut the lines at Disney World and the airport, and also walking around with two poles, it starts a lot of conversations. Not to mention there's an X in my name, and so people are always asking, how do you pronounce that? And by the way, it's Xian or Xian, in case anyone was wondering. But yeah, so I think, as I feel like I now know that I was meant to stand out, and I own that and embrace it fully. And I think it's my job, and this is where the advocacy comes in, to help others embrace who they are fully, disability or no disability. I want to see everyone empowered, and I would love not to have a job.
I love that, Shan. Thank you so much. And yes, we will get into the nitty gritty of your different chapters of your journey. But I love what you shared from the very beginning. You've noticed that observation. It's not about, the differences. It's simply like, hey, is it okay for me to just get to know you? Is there something that I need to say or not do? And I feel like that's something that, as somebody who is newer to learning about the community of the disability, the disabled, the advocates, what the protocols are, what to say, what to not say. I was like, geez, like I don't want to say the wrong thing. And I'm curious, like Xian, as folks are perhaps maybe this is their first introduction, in fact, what would you share as a way that they can be a better ally, or like, some mistakes to avoid if they are learning about it for the first time, and how to be a better advocate, even from 101?
Yeah, and I think, the key is, and I think the difficulty is that there's not one term. If you're dealing with disability advocates who've been doing this a while, they have most likely, come to terms in a beautiful way with disability and now are celebrating that. And so it's capital D, disabled, proud, and I've definitely come around to that ship as well. Although I use both people with disabilities and disabled, in a proud way. But I think the difficulty is there's not one term. And so I think the best thing you can do is communicate. Say, first of all, I think the first thing is learn somebody's name before you learn their labels. I think, because that's, again, going to the human capacity. I think that's the most important thing to call somebody, is call them by their name, and then obviously they may tell you what terms. And if they don't, you can say, look, I'd like to be respectful. Please tell me, how do you refer to this or that? Now, if you're first meeting somebody, that might not even be relevant, right? So you also have to kind of read the room, which can be hard. And, everyone's at a different place in their journey. And some people may not even identify as a person with a disability. And when you bring that up, they're like, what? Or get, can get hurt by that. And so that is tricky. But, if it's in a professional setting where that is relevant. So, for example, if you're about to interview someone, you might want to find out, like, okay, how do you identify? And I think that's true, disability or no disability, right? Anytime, for any community that has a difference, or that is not like mainstream white cis, So I think, the difficulty is there's not one answer to that question. And I think the most important thing is you talk to the person in front of you and recognize that not everyone is going to universally agree. I can tell you, for example, 99% of the disability community doesn't like the term handy capable, or these like very kit glovey. I personally, for me, I don't like differently abled. Like, and I see a lot of DEI spaces still using that. For me, like, I just want to get rid of the kit gloves. We are not so sensitive, and that we can't just be like, hey, I'm disabled and I'm here. But obviously, there are a few exceptions. I remember being on Clubhouse, and there was a woman, probably 60 years old, who said she likes it when her son calls her handy capable. And I was like, oh, like, okay, but she's definitely the exception and not the rule. So this is why it's so important when you're one-on-one with somebody, you just ask the person in front of you. And there are a list of words that and I can give those to you as a resource,
Yes,
Monica.
please. Yes.
But
And we're
I
going to have
actually,
those in the show notes, folks. So that way you can continue the learning.
yeah, and
Xian, sorry, continue on.
I just want to say, though, I will be
Yeah.
honest that with AI, I'm not even going to say them on the air because I would never want it to be used in the wrong way. But don't worry,
Mm.
Monica's got your back because I will send those to her as a follow up. But there are certain words that are definitely a no, and then there
Yeah.
are the words that people can't agree. And I think this is also true in communities of color. Where when you have a huge community of any group,
Yeah.
you're not going to have a monolith of responses to that. And so the good news is you have to get to know the people in front of you.
And thank you so much for sharing that. And to that, in a way, complex question that has a lot of layers and help breaking that apart. And so you've heard it, folks. Go to the show notes. If you can't find it, always send me an email or send either of us a note. We'll make sure that you get the resources because we're here to learn. I mean, I think that's one of the things I am really inspired this month to re-educate myself as well as I've, humbly shared as well. I'm also still learning. And I think every time I'm being reminded of just like, to your point of like, hey, let's remember, start with the name. Like everyone has a name, like ask what their name is. Don't like think about the other aspects. And to your point, like Xian, I want to go back to the early childhood story that was so beautiful that you share like, hey, like, can we like play with you? And I'm curious, like, because like you grew up in the States, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly, right?
Yeah.
Tell me what that was, because also you still grew up also in an Asian American household. And as AAPI, there's an extra layer of tension. And I think even with the warmth and family support, there's just not enough conversations about this advocacy and empowerment. And so, how did that influence you? Perhaps that fueled you even more. Tell me a little bit more how it felt growing up.
Well, let's talk about privilege for a second to answer that question, because I have to say that, I am very aware that the Asian community in its perfectionistic tendencies, I think is even harder on disability than I would say most American households would be. That obviously has exceptions to it. And having a Chinese mom and a Jewish dad who were more artists than they were. My dad became a lawyer to please his mother, but what he loves to talk about is interior design, and he opened like 3 or 4 restaurants in his lifetime, and he loves to cook. So his creative bone is really, I always say my dad's a part-time everything, but the only thing that he's a full-time is an artist, because he's always thinking about creativity and beauty and those things. And so, my dad spent most of until he was like 35, he was like a lifeguard. He loved being in the water. He did not really care about school very much, although he, in his era, going to college was already an advantage. But his mom basically said to him, either you get a job or you go to school. So he went to school. Yeah. And so I'm just saying this, that's not the typical like path of a Jewish family. And then of course, in my Chinese side of the family, and this is interesting, my grandmother was a doctor, my grandfather was a lawyer, and that's how they met. My grandmother was in the medical school and he was in the law school, my grandfather. And so they were already those things, and they were they came from wealthy families. And so because of that, I think a lot of the pressure sometimes is because you want the next generation to do better than you. But because they were already doing well, and I think had very liberal families themselves, they raised my mom and my uncles and aunts to be just whoever they wanted to be. There was no pressure of like, this is what you need to do to please me, which is not this is not the norm. And Monica, I know that you're nodding furiously because so having a mom that was, she was never academic. She was always sketching. She was always drawing. So her parents just supported her in that. And so as a result, because that's how she was raised, that's how she raised me. And my dad just being a free spirit, I even remember at a point on the school bus, this is a story I don't think I've ever told this publicly, but on the school bus once, when I was about 8 years old, I went through a really smart mouth phase, and my bus driver said to me, "Oh, Sean, you have an answer for everything. You should be a lawyer." And I was so proud because, my dad's a lawyer, and I'm thinking that, oh, I'm going to be just like dad. So for a minute there, I was like, maybe I could do this too. And my dad goes, "Sean, you don't want to be a lawyer." I figured, right? My dad being a lawyer would know, and knowing me, he would know. So that shut down my, 30-second dream of being a lawyer because I just love my dad so much. But like, so this is how I was raised, which is not the typical experience. So I've been privileged in love and privileged in that support that they just wanted me to be who I wanted to be rather than having some ideas of who I should be. And because neither of them did very, particularly well in academics, it just wasn't a priority for them. They're brilliant people. But that just wasn't where their hearts were. When I was if I got a B or an A, as long as I was passing, they were happy, so anyway, so that I do want to put that as the context, but, being aware that obviously there is more pressure in the Asian community about perfectionistic standards in general. I will say that, the Chinese side of my family, they will openly talk to you about your weight, you know, they will openly talk to you about, anyway, I don't know. But as far as disability, I think also having, a Chinese grandmother who was a doctor, she was almost too technical and like so honest that like there was no judgment of my disability because it was just a thing. Not to mention that my oldest uncle, the eldest in the family, had albinism. So she had some experience in having someone different in the family, and I think she was almost too practical to have other ideas about it. She's very forthright. She's passed, but it's so funny because she's my Jewish grandmother and my Chinese grandmother were almost opposites. But the thing that they had in common is they were both incredibly resilient and strong women. Yeah. So I have that legacy of coming from, many generations of strong women. And so I think I was able to draw strength from that and, had more of that than judgment. And so by the time I got out in the world, I was so
Mm.
secure in my disability specifically that it didn't matter what anybody said about it. I can, you can say almost anything to me and I will be like, okay, yes, thank you, next. Because, I am so aware of the
Yeah.
fact that living in New York City also is a privilege because you're
Yeah.
exposed to every type of human being. And
Hmm.
I think it confuses me if anyone would be racist here or
Mm.
Zionist here because it's a melting pot of everyone, and that's the beauty of it. And being exposed to
Yeah.
everyone, it is totally different if you're growing up in a small town in Kentucky or somewhere in the middle. I understand that. So I believe I also have diversity privilege because I went to public
Mm.
school where we had rich kids, poor kids, middle class kids, every race, every situation. And so I'm really glad in a way that I didn't go to private school for that reason, is that I also just
Mm.
I was exposed to lots of kinds of people. And so I think you can bake in a lot of tolerance there. And so I couldn't answer that question without addressing the privilege that I have, because I know that that is not
Yeah.
the typical Asian experience, that is not the typical disability
Mm.
experience.
Mm.
I understand that, I was given a lot of love and support. And really, to answer your previous question, and that is really
Yeah.
why, even though I was the most stage frightened person you could imagine, and I had my self-conscious years, especially teens and early 20s, I had to look that fear in the face and realize there were so many people that I needed to be that love and
Mm.
support for, because you don't have control over whether you have great
Yeah.
parents or the right school systems. Right. So,
Shan, I want to really take a moment to honor your parents and your family and all the loved ones that you have because, especially because, we researched the folks before they join, and everything that Xian describes makes now even so much more sense given the work that she does today and how she shows up. I mean, the first time I was connected to Xian, I was very inspired by just her
Aw,
thoughtful,
so sweet.
optimism and just like warm energy that you are hearing just through her voice from the
Mm.
passion. And it's not a coincidence. And I think thank you to your parents and your family, and you honoring that and highlighting also that is important, because I think it's something that we don't recognize enough and we only see it in hindsight. And so appreciate you sharing that. And so it piggybacks then to kind of your journey of now becoming the founder of the Give Beauty Wings. What is the mission? How did that come together? And tell us more about it.
So, Give Beauty Wings started as a self-esteem program that came out of a pitch I did for the Dove campaign, asking them to include people with disabilities in their advertising. It was a minute and 23-second video that I made in my mother's living room, literally no budget. It was a guy from church helping me out making this video. And the reason I created it again was asking that question because my second job ever, I worked for a theater in New York with 45 members total, 15 with disabilities. And these were the most brilliant, beautiful people I'd ever met, struggling with disability identity, struggling with self-esteem. And actually, to be honest with you, I guess artists, typically do. So, I mean, it was amazing to me, not even just from a disability standpoint, but just to see that everyone, in writing in their journals would seem to be struggling. And I was like, these are the most beautiful people I've ever met. If this is how they're doing, how's everyone else doing? And I really asked myself specifically around disability, how come, I mean, not to say that you don't have conflict, but I never struggled with the disability identity part. Like that was kind of the easy part of my life. Obviously, totally oblivious to the things that we still needed to fight for in transportation, employment, assistive tech, and fashion and beauty, and all the things that I'm doing now. This is pre-advocacy, Sean, right? So, I'm not saying there weren't issues, but I had really grown up in a kind of bubble that was created for me. And I kind of stayed in that bubble for a long time. But once I took a peek outside and I thought, oh my God, these are the most beautiful people I've ever met. If this is, and they're struggling, it made me think about what about everyone else. And so I pitched the Dove campaign because I said, where else do we get our sense of self-esteem? Of course, it's media, it's many things. But the answer that came to me at the time was the beauty industry. And Dove had already celebrated, women of all sizes, and they had already celebrated, older women. So they seemed to me like the most natural partner. I will tell you, they did not even respond. I do know that 2 people pitched on my behalf. And I never even heard from them how those meetings went. I never heard from them again, to be honest with you. And so the good part of that is that my former boss saw the video and said, hey, in lieu of what you're trying to do, can you help us out? We're doing True Story Project, which is what I had actually, I skipped over this part, but I ended up performing, the most stage frightened person you could imagine, ended up performing in a show called True Story Project. And when that was over, she said, we want to do the True Story Project with these girls 14 to 21. Can you help us? It happened
Wow.
to be at NYU. And the next semester,
Oh.
the main teacher could not do it anymore. And so the coordinator came to me and said, is there anything you want to talk to the girls about? They miss you. And I was like, I want them to know how beautiful they are. Because similar to the theater that I had been a part of, they were writing, I mean, even darker things and only 14 years old. And I feel like I always say this, but I was sitting in a room full of light bulbs and everyone's talking about how dark everything is. And I wanted to say, do you know who you are? And so I ended up, basically creating a 6-week curriculum from my own personal journey, my low point being, I would say high school, where I could count on one hand the number of people who would talk to me because I started to count myself out. And it was not disability related, by the way. I was actually, I mean, it sounds strange, but I was really popular until I started. And I think what happened is, if you create your existence based off validation from others, and kind of realizing, I had a moment. I'll tell you the moment quickly, which
Yes,
was, I
please.
had
Yeah.
there were four girls in high school that I always saw together, thought they were best friends. And one day they were all together and one of them left. And before she left, they said, "Oh, please don't go. Kissy, kissy, huggy, huggy." As soon as she was gone, "Oh my God, she's such a beep." And I was like, what? If this is how they are with their best friends, like, what do they think of me? And I had a falling out with three different friend groups at the same time. Keep in mind, only 63 people in my entire grade. The class was 32 people. So I started to just completely lose my sense of, like, I I became self-conscious even to answer the question, like, "How are you?" I felt like there had to be a right answer, and I loved everybody so much that the idea that they couldn't love me back was like a devastating option. And I would love to say that I could just, like, you know, brush it off and everything would be fine. But I mean, that's also why I wanted to make these courses, because I wanted to make sure that for the 15-year-old girl in me, that I would be giving them resources. Like, this is how I felt at my lowest point, and this is what I wish I had done. This is what you might be feeling about your disability, but I want to tell you that you can make it awesome, and you don't have to absorb how people see you. It's more important how you see you. So these are the kinds of things that I was able to infuse in the 6-week program, really based off my own experience and seeing where my own experience could help others to make sure that they don't have the hangups that, they could. So anyway, so that was and it became, my program was called Give Beauty Wings. So it was a self-esteem program to begin with. But then I realized, again, with the advocacy hat on, how much we needed in terms of employment. And not only that, when I was doing this work, what it was really about was, everyone in that room, when we would do these courses, was really, they wanted to be a writer, but they weren't writing, or they wanted to do this, but their mom wouldn't let them out of the house. And so for me, I realized that self-esteem, is really about purpose. And so Give Beauty Wings is about putting our beauty to action, because we all have that God-given beauty inside of us. It just needs seeds and waters to grow. And I think a lot of times what happens is we let our excuses or our fears or, get in the way. And so I even said to them on the first day I was ever teaching, it was raining at the time. I said, "It's raining right now, but is the sun shining any less brightly?" And they said, "No." And I said, "That's exactly why we're here. You know, my job is only to get as many of the clouds out of the way so you can shine as brightly as possible." But the nonprofit side of Give Beauty Wings is really about making sure that we have support systems. If you want to be an actor, but you don't have access to a mentor, or you want to apply for a job, but you've never had someone to look at your resume. Ultimately, what I would like Give Beauty Wings to be is almost a leadership academy where we're able to support people who are looking to share their gifts and hone them and develop them. Right now, Give Beauty Wings, I'm so excited. 2024 has been amazing. We've, already done a dating workshop. We've already done, yeah, that was in March.
That's so
Yeah,
cool.
and for 2024 especially,
Yeah.
I wanted to address a lot of issues that I think people are
Mm.
afraid to talk to people with disabilities about. So things like
Mm.
sex and money, right? So dating,
Mhm.
and
Hard topic with anyone.
yeah, I say that all the time. It's kind of a taboo topic for everyone. So
Oh,
imagine
yeah.
being disabled, being a woman, being a
Mm.
person of color, and I want
Mm.
to kind of embrace the taboo and, like, let's dig into. There's so many
Yeah.
specific issues around money that the disability
Yeah.
community has that nobody knows about and nobody's talking about. Except I have to give a shout out to Tori Dunlap,
Yeah.
who had me on
Mm.
her Financial Feminist podcast. She's the first, finance, I hate the word guru, but the first leader in finance that has a huge following that has talked about this topic. And I want to thank her. I, she's
Mm.
going to be, at least at this point, she's going to be part of our October workshop for National Disability Employment Awareness
That's
Month.
amazing.
Yeah, so we're having one called Negotiating Your Worth. We had it last October, and it was such a big hit. People were asking, when is the
Wow.
next one? Please make sure there's a next one. So dating and money, and then the other one, which I'm so excited, which is, this month, is the
July.
beauty and fashion, because that's another area where I just think there's lower expectations
Yeah.
around fashion and beauty for people with disabilities. There, the
Mm.
root of even the word handicap
Mm.
um, comes from veterans. Okay, after the war,
Yeah.
not being able to get jobs, and so putting their caps in their hands and begging for money. So
Mm.
handicap, hand and cap. Um, the roots of that is poverty, is charity. And so one of the missions that I have that has been really clear for me in 2024 is just making sure that we break away from this poverty mindset. And that can honestly, I mean, there's a lot of privilege in fashion and beauty as well. So actually, all of these things are connected. Dating too, like if you don't have, a great date outfit, or you don't have if you don't feel beautiful, you're going to show up differently if you even get a date, right? If you even feel like you're not going to feel bold enough to flirt maybe if you don't have those things. So all of, again, Give Beauty Wings is about putting our beauty to action. And so whether that's a job or engaging more in your social life, or, and I even say with Give Beauty Wings, it's also about, like, if you love to sing and you want to sing in the shower, like, it's not even about being excellent at everything all the time. It's just about self-expression and being the fullness of who you are and finding out more about yourself,
I
and
love
so
it.
Give Beauty Wings programs, the workshops, are really
Mm.
about, talking about those taboo topics, but in a way that empowers us and gives us a way forward action wise, because beauty means nothing without
Yeah.
action,
Mm.
you know?
So important. Well, thank you, Shan, so much for deep diving into all these different. I mean, congratulations
Thank
on a
you.
half-year success already that you've had,
Thank
and many
you.
more programs. I know we'll absolutely make sure folks will know how to sign up for some of those upcoming sessions, find a way to learn about some of the past ones you've done
Yeah,
as
thank
well.
you.
But the kind of theme that I'm continuing to hear as I hear your story, and thank you for getting through the details, because that's kind of where the juicy part is and the insights, is the reminder that when you have those difficult moments, awkward moments, tough moments, whether it was at your early childhood period, and thank you again for even bringing vulnerability during your teenage periods. I think many of us, I've had actually a pretty tough teen high school experience too. And I think, well, I don't know, like, I guess we're all like, teenage time is like not really a fun time,
Well, wait
but
a
thank
minute.
God we all survived
Puberty
it
is
through.
rough on everybody, right?
If you're listening as a teenager, don't worry, you're going to pass through that. So hang in there a little bit more.
Oh,
There's
yes.
going to be the golden 20s and 30s that's going to come very soon.
Oh, yeah. And in a way, though, I'm grateful it happened because it makes it sweeter. And
Yeah.
also, I said this
Yeah.
time and time again, mostly to myself,
Mm-mm.
but if I did not have the experience that I had in high school, I would not
Mm.
have had the ability to help others. Because I'll be
Yeah.
honest with you, even
Yeah.
my wonderful parents, right? They were
Yeah.
always popular. They were always extroverted. I mean, so when I was going through that, they were like, oh, just don't
Yeah.
pay attention to them. But that wasn't advice that I could
That wasn't
practically
the.
use. Like, and so in a way, like, I'm so grateful that I had that feeling,
Mm.
because now I
Yeah.
can talk to anyone that's ever been an outsider and say, I've been there too. And here's what I wish I had done about it. And
And that's part of the secret, Sasha. And sorry
yeah,
to interrupt,
no.
that I just want to get a chance to dive deeper, which is you somehow have the magic power to make those vulnerable, tough moments, not only overcoming it, which is in itself amazing, but rechanneling that into a powerful new powerhouse to empower others, new problem solving, new ways to address, new ways to look at things, which I think is so inspiring.
Oh,
And you do it in a consistent kind of like growing magnitude. Every
oh.
time I catch up, I was like, oh my gosh, like what else is Xian working on? And like what else is she changing the world? But I'm curious, like going back to that very beginning, like what helped you to get out of that shell, to help you get back up, to know that it's okay? Like you, as you said, I think one of the things you're already commenting is that when somebody feels down, when somebody is feeling stuck, whether it's self-esteem, whether it's because of disability, whether it's just because of being different, or even actually being the same, or just having a different thought, or anything cause, it's not easy to get back up. And I think we often like skip through, like, hooray, like, let's get through it. But tell me a little bit more, like, what helped you, if you can bring us back to
Yeah.
that memory line? And as a result, what values are important that we should carry on, and maybe how we address our difficult moments continually as innovators, because we face it all the time.
Yeah, well, that's such a deep and wonderful question that we could do a whole hour on that. But I will try to, I'll give you something that really helped was, in defense of my school. First of all, it was an incredible education where everybody there wanted to change the world, and they always had us thinking about how we could question culture and make it better. So I think that was a beautiful thing that I'm able to bring into the work that I do as well. And then going to Wesleyan, where also everybody there wanted to change the world in some way. I was very intimidated at that time, though, I got to say, when meeting 18-year-olds who had already started 2 nonprofits, and like there were a lot of overachievers there, and they were also super humble and laid back, which was nice. But I also felt like, oh my God, everyone around me is changing the world. So I kind of felt like because advocacy did not occur to me, and because I hadn't really found what made me tick yet, I was like, okay, well, they're shining brightly, I'm just going to hang back. And I think one thing I realized is that the beauty in you does not take away from the beauty in me or anyone else. And I think sometimes we look to the left and we look to the right at what other people are doing, and we either get competitive, which is not me, or in my case, I kind of shrank. And I was like, well, I'm just going to, I don't even remember doing any extracurriculars, anything, just trying to survive, getting through. Wesleyan was academically rigorous. And so just trying to get through my classes and sort of stay under the radar. Again, like, I don't believe in hiding your light under a basket, I think now. And, but I think Wesleyan was a really fresh beginning for me, at least socially. So I wasn't ready to stick my neck out in any way, I think, yet, professionally, but I was able to find a sense of belonging and community almost immediately. And so having a fresh start, being able to say, like, I remember dancing my tail off at prom, knowing that I'm out of here in a couple weeks, like this thing that I really look back and I kind of blame myself for my own thinking. Like, I counted myself out and I became so awkward and self-conscious. People didn't know what to do with that. And, it could be easy to, you would say, well, people could have been kinder, but I mean, everybody was trying to survive. That's the thing about high school, is like, I don't think anybody was happy, at least at my school. And so I can give grace to that, that everyone was just trying to survive. And I think Wesleyan was a fresh start, and also having people who genuinely wanted to change the world and who you could have conversations with till 2, 3 in the morning. That was the beginning of that. And then I think, I had a tendency, though, in college was, I would follow what my boyfriends liked and wanted to do. And so I've also, I think learning too that following people, if you follow someone who's lost, you're going to get lost too. And so I think my faith was a huge part of that, is realizing, like, no one on planet Earth is perfect. But I do believe that, like, just realizing that I was doing things for a greater good than just whether people liked me, and being able to say, because when I realized that people were suicidal that I was meeting, or, people were really struggling, I realized it wasn't about me. And so having something bigger to work towards and work for, I think really was where the big breakthrough happened. Where, yeah, I realized it's not about how's my hair and do people like me. It's about how can I use my experience and my low moments to lift others up. So I feel like it's a source of fuel and power. Anytime that we've been marginalized, we can use it for something greater. And because we have the internet, you don't have to be me or Monica to make a difference, right? Anyone can start a YouTube channel. Anyone can start a blog.
Absolutely.
Anyone can post to their Instagram and share how they're feeling. And it is vulnerable, and you won't have everybody loving you and liking you all the time.
Yeah.
I think that was also something I had to be okay with. So I had to be secure enough to realize, like, my message is for whoever it's for. So there are going to be people who will never get it, and that's okay. But I do think, because I know that lives are at stake and lives can be changed by, just shifting your mindset can change how you live your life. I want to get the messages that we are all beautiful and everyone counts, and that there's something great that anybody can do, whether you have privilege or not. We all have, and this is true for nonverbal, we all have a voice, we all have a perspective, that needs to be shared, and a story that matters. So I think, being okay with not everyone getting it or liking me, I think was the most freeing thing that happened. Because there's too much at stake for me to hide. And I want to make sure that no one is hiding.
Xian, that is very, very powerful. And I think folks can hear your speaker voice in you organically just coming out, wanting to empower all of us, inspire all of us. A few rapid fire questions building on that. I think the other thing, leaders and listeners are always looking out for is like, we're empowered and inspired, but we also want to see the reality, Xian, like what's actually on your calendar, like just hearing about everything you have done, and you probably have a very packed schedule. How do you make the time to recharge? How do you manage your time? Any tips and tricks that you found to be helpful for you?
I'm always asking that questions of other leaders too, because it is, I'm still, I think one thing is actually being okay with asking for help. So getting myself an assistant in the last 2 years has been super helpful, because I think I was a one-woman show for a really long time. And wanting to grow my organization so that it isn't just me, and that it can serve many more in the communities that need to hear these messages and need the support. So I think that's a big thing that's freed up some of my time and stress, is like, I'm not great, as you saw, I'm not great with the technical part. So having someone else that
we're all learning. Yeah.
Right. And, paperwork, because I'm an ideas person, the paperwork is not exciting for me. And so and I think this is also like a time saver, sometimes realizing what you're not good at so that somebody else can, and realizing what you are good at so that you're not wasting someone else's time who might not be good at that thing. This is why we need each other and why we make each other better, is that we're not all good at the same thing. And so I think, having a good team around me is like, has been my priority for 2024. And I think, and I think that's also true for friendships and all kinds of relationships too, having a good support system. And I think actually the thing I would encourage anyone that's struggling with time is make sure that you make time for self-care. Like, that's just as important as whatever else you have on your calendar. And so in 2024, I remember the first week of 2024, I, like a week apart, I had like 11-hour night of sleep, and I hadn't done that in like years. And I felt like a different woman. And I was like, wait, this is really important, that I don't think, what's right for you is maybe different, but I realized like, no, 2024, I need to prioritize rest. And it makes me more effective in the work that I do. So, I mean, kind of an Ariana Huffington answer, because I know that she, always evangelizes on sleep. But it's not to be understated. So, and obviously I think also knowing how to say no to some of the things that, we have this tendency to want to say yes to everything. Yeah. And I think actually understanding that the economic empowerment of my community and myself was important. Like, I started, I used to do 80% free. I will say for the first 7 years of what I did, 80,
Wow.
80% free, 20% paid. And we could go into the roots, I think, around
Yeah.
disability that makes
Uh-huh.
people feel more than any community that it's okay to
Yeah.
ask people with disabilities to work for free because,
Mm,
oh, you should just be happy you're invited into the room or it's for
that's not
exposure.
right.
I was
Yeah.
underpaid for 7 years and it was my own fault
Oh my gosh.
because guess what? As soon as I started saying no, and started
Mhm.
working. I want to thank also, I went to Wesleyan where corporations are the man and all this stuff. And I got to say, it was
Mhm.
actually working with corporations that were thoughtful and willing
Mm.
to pay me well that I
Yeah.
really, and also when a corporation comes to you, they can't say they don't have the money because if it's
Yeah.
if it's like a Target or a Walmart and,
Mhm.
we know that they have the money. And so there's
Mhm.
something freeing in that.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm saying that is learning to say no more to the things that you
Mm.
don't have to do or you don't
Yeah.
feel called to do. It's a really
Yeah.
empowering feeling, and it can also empower your
Mhm.
calendar. So I feel like I work, I don't work hard. People think I work hard. I work smart now. Um,
Mm. Very important
and
distinction.
being able to
Yeah.
work, with bigger organizations means you do
Yeah.
one thing and it has seismic impact, and I do believe, I'm still going to be, helping out the Harlem Children's Funds of the world. I'm not saying I won't be volunteering my time, but it should be my choice what I do for free. And I
Yeah.
think the
Yeah.
disability community, more than any other marginalized community, although I think people of color and women know this well, are often
Mhm.
leaned on and expected to do things that they wouldn't ask of white men. So I think,
Mhm.
you know what I mean, in terms of,
Yeah.
so being able to say to no to certain things, I think also helps time
Mm.
management, so that you can say yes to the things that really make you soar and feel good and that make your heart sing. So I don't do anything I
I
don't want to
love
do
it.
anymore.
That's amazing, Xian. Thank you so much. I think there were so many nuggets of wisdom that we're going to want to recircle back and realize. And good thing you can listen back anytime. But before we know it, we're almost wrapping up. I feel like time flew by so fast. Three last rapid questions that I
Sure.
have as we wrap up is one, in celebration of the different months, we've asked all our guests to help us. That we can teach us how we can learn better. So if you can introduce us to three innovators who happen to be working in disability or a disabled person that we should learn from, could you do a shout out, and then I'll get the notes from you later after the show so that we put it in the blog. Who are
Oh
three
my God,
people
you're
you
going
think
to
we
get
should
me
learn
into so
from?
much trouble because I know way more than three. And then they're going to call me and say,
Well, we'll start
hey,
with three and we're going to add more in the blog. So you're going to want to start with three. You're going to see more names in the blog.
yeah,
We
well, I
want, we're
mean,
not going to get her into trouble.
I don't know. Okay. Well, I have to say that I absolutely, as a personal friend, I adore her, but I also see that I think the great allies are, the great advocates are also allies. So I
Mm.
think Emily Ladau, who literally wrote the book on disability
Mm.
inclusion, she wrote a book called Demystifying Disability, What to Say, What to Do, and, or like, anyway, there's a whole long subtitle to that, which
Uh-huh.
we will put in the notes. But
Yes, yes, we will.
she wrote Demystifying Disability, and she got criticized a lot for what was not in the book. And to her
Wow.
credit, she really took that criticism. And I
Mm.
personally feel that if anyone has a problem with her book, they should write their own. I don't think that there's one person saying one authority on this is what disability is.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-mm.
so, but I think she's an incredible person because she always takes the feedback and wants to learn about those of us
Mm-hmm.
in the community that, we all don't have the same experience. And I think a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
goes to the misconception, that, sometimes
Yes.
if you have a
That we
disability, you
spoke
know about
earlier.
every
Yeah.
disability there ever has been, and
Yeah.
you speak for all disability. And I
Yeah.
think that's a really dangerous
It's not a
thing.
monolith.
Right.
Nope.
And so I'm always trying to learn, from my friends who are blind, deaf, all along the communities to see like, what is it that I don't know, so I can advocate for that as well, or at least make space for someone else who would advocate better, with a lived experience. And I think Emily's always looking to learn and grow, and she really takes that feedback. And
Thank you.
I think she's the Judy Human of our generation. And I've told her this. So there's Emily. Haben Girma is also someone that I think I'm really attracted to, women who support other women. And I love to see disability advocates supporting each other, because I think there can be a scarcity mindset. This is true for AAPI and a lot of other communities where, if there are limited opportunities, there's this sense of like, oh no, I've got to keep it to myself. So anyone who's sort of generous with their time and celebrates other people's wins, I love to see. So Haben Girma has an incredible book called Haben, which I highly, highly recommend reading as well. And then, again, I'm just going with my friends here. There's so many people, but Jessica Cox, the first and only woman without arms to have her pilot's license. She's also a black belt in Taekwondo, and she's just someone who has supported me a lot. But I feel like she really tries to brighten up the world in sharing her story, and she's really open-hearted. And so, but I do want to say that I think, the three I mentioned are very famous disability advocates, and I didn't pick them because they were famous. I picked them because I feel that they are real. They're really supportive of seeing the community grow, and they're not trying to take every opportunity for themselves. So there's so many people who aren't well known that deserve to be on this list. So I want to say that it's not just because people will know them and they're very Googleable. It's because they're also incredible human beings.
And we'll make sure we add those in the notes. So please come visit, check out. We're going to have all those other resources to make sure we continue on the learning. Xian, you shared so much different wisdom and perspective, opened our eyes, reminded us of important values. What's at least one thing you would remind us all as we walk away as innovators, no matter where we are in the journey?
Yeah, I think embrace where you are, because sometimes we can get very results oriented. Like,
oh yes.
and there's no one destination too. So like, just because you're not where your particular goal may be, I will say something controversial. I don't believe in vision boards, even though I know they work, because I feel like my vision is way smaller than what's possible for me. And I feel like everything that I dreamed about, like everything in my life, has been bigger than that. So I would say that, embrace where you are, but also know that, like, if you don't get that thing that's on your goal list or your vision board, like, there's something greater for you out there. That's, and that being said, I think the most important thing, as long as you're putting yourself out there, if you know that you're doing it from a genuine place or genuine sense of service, I think you can't go wrong, and there's no losing. I don't believe in failure also. And I'm sorry, I can't do a short answer. Do you notice if you try to do a quick fire?
I know. I already got so many wisdom on that.
You're trying to do quick fire, and I'm like, yeah, this fire's burning long. But yeah, and I think also just being like patient with where you are, and knowing that even if you don't get there, it's not a failure. There might be another path that so-called the thing that didn't pan out is leading you to. Like when Dove didn't get back to me, it actually opened up my world, because I realized that this beauty thing that we were talking about was so much bigger than one beauty company. And if it had happened, it might have been a 5-minute story and it would have been nice, but that wasn't really what it was about. And the fact that most people who supported it did not have disabilities, there was something universal that was happening there. I forgot to tell you that the Dove video I made it for one person. My cousin said, well, you made it already. Why don't you share it on Facebook? And so it went semi-viral, not Justin Bieber viral. But it went viral enough that I got letters from the Philippines and Japan and Australia. a man with AIDS for 30 years and rheumatoid arthritis.
Wow.
And I got to tell you, even I didn't realize how big the disability community was in that moment. I was thinking about mobility disability, I'll be honest. And, and also I would say, be willing to learn. So for example, that video I'm going to call myself out on is not, the video that went viral is not captioned or audio described. I didn't even know about that. But again, this is how we become an ally. The more we learn, the more we know, the more we can do. And, I think, just putting yourself out there and also giving yourself grace, I think is really important.
Absolutely. Well, hey, that was the One Wisdom Buckets. You are all lucky to be empowered and inspired. The final question is, Xian, what's the best way we can stay in touch with you for folks who want to follow up?
Oh my goodness. Well, my email address is on my website. I would go to xianhorn.com or xianhorn.com, XIANHORN.com. You could also Instagram. I was not a fan of Instagram, but I've come around. That's where I'm most active now. And I'll tell you the reason why. This is an inclusive reason. It's one of the easiest places to write alt text. And alt text helps, blind and low vision folks to have descriptions of what's happening in pictures.
I see.
So anyway, Instagram is great. A wonderful way. Please message me anytime. Just know that I'm available. I would love to be a resource for anyone listening. So thank you for asking.
Well, thank you, Xian, so much for spending some time with us. Folks, thank you for tuning in for another conversation. We're definitely inspired and empowered. And Xian, we're so blessed to have you.
So blessed to have you.
And thank you for the work that you continue to do and inspiring others. We look forward to continue to looking out, supporting, and finding ways how we can continue to learn and empower others. So thank you so much. Thank you, folks, for tuning in. We'll be back again with another story next week. So make sure you subscribe and check out for another story. And we'll learn from another innovator soon. So I'll see you soon again. Bye. Thanks so much for tuning into today's episode. It was so great having you. I hope this has inspired you and empowered you to know that your voice and stories matter. This is your host, Monica Kang, founder and CEO of Innovators Box. And a little shout out to the wonderful team who made this possible today. Audio engineering and producing by
Sam Lamerd.
Audio engineering support by
Ravi Ladd.
Website and marketing support by
Kree Pandey.
Graphic support by
Leah Orsini.
Christine Eribal.
Original music by Innovators Box Studios, which you can also check out in any music platform. And executive producing, writing, hosting, and interviewing by me, Monica Kang, founder and CEO of Innovators Box. Please give us feedback, questions, thoughts. We want to hear from you. Send a hello at curiousmonica.com. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.